It's Daybreak on the Rise News. As promised, it's time for the press review. First look at what's on the front pages and analysis of the big stories. Well, as usual, let's begin with our sister publication. And this morning, a couple of papers actually reporting on the Kaduna bombing. But here's how this day is reporting it. From that exclusive interview with the Rise News Newsnight, the CDS, that's the Chief of Defense Staff on Kaduna bombing, we acted on intelligence but missed. It's highly regrettable. Some of the writers to that story. Defense Headquarters explains how drone acquired eliminated targets, says suspicious movement of celebrating crowd posed threats. Army Chief visits victims, apologizes to review operations. Tinubu others probe, declares incident painful, disturbing. Atiku Obi say miscalculated airstrikes becoming worrisome. ACF, NEF, JNI call for investigation and compensation. Well, the leading photograph there for this day, this morning, there are two photographs, but the bolder one is that of the Enugu State Governor presenting his inaugural budget. He calls it Budget of Disruptive Economic Growth. Well, above the masthead this morning for this day, the finance minister was also speaking, Wale Edu. He says Nigeria eyeing multi-trillion-dollar climate change financing, privatization to fund 2024 budget. Ministers, senators welcome plan to privatize ministries, departments and agencies, real estate property. And in the black strip there, just above the masthead, a bike banner to receive Lifetime Achievement Honor at Dame Awards. And that's about it on the front page of this day this morning.
The Punch this morning, leading headline, Kaduna village bombing. Death toll hits 120. Villagers allege military bomb twice. One family loses 32 members. Culprits must be punished. Survivors ACF JNI tell military. Meanwhile, Army Chief begs victims, says soldiers mistook villagers for bandits. The President, Tinubu, is mourning. The leading photos there this morning on the Punch shows survivors of that bomb receiving treatment at the Borno Diko Teaching Hospital in Kaduna on Tuesday. PDP says cabal running Akeredolu's government and stealing funds. Above the nameplate of the Punch this morning, auction, presidential aircraft bidders get December 24 deadline. The federal government seeks 35 billion naira to revive Ajaokuta Steel. Meanwhile, Power Finance Ministries get 618 billion naira loan as CSOs kick. That's the Punch.
And the Tribune leads with survivors recounting detail of the Kaduna tragic drone attack this morning. Tinubu, ACF, NEF, as the NEF and the JNI call for probe. Lagbaja visits village, regrets incident, how unwanted tragedy occurred. The Defense Headquarters speaking there. 85 killed, 66 injured, says the National Emergency Management Agency. So clearly the figures are varying from different accounts. And you do have pictures there of some of the survivors. And of course, you have the Chief of Army Staff visiting then the delegation with the Islamic leader there. That was at the site of the bombing where the casualties have now been buried. Well, about the masthead for the Nigerian Tribune this morning, Makinde presents 432.2 billion naira budget, prioritizes education and health. Umba also presents his 521 billion naira budget. Education gets 33%. Renewed Hope Agenda, my priority in Police Affairs Ministry. That's from the Minister of State for that ministry. The Tribune for you this morning.
Let's take a look at the Daily Independent. Its headline this morning, focusing on Nigerian airlines as they lament $60 million loss to bird strikes annually. It says carriers suffer 60 bird strikes in 10 months in 2023 They're asking the federal government to reduce cost of bird damages with modern techs. Also, Tinubu orders investigation after Army airstrike kills over 65. The Army chief visits bombed village and apologizes. Also donates 10 million naira. Federal government to compensate Kaduna airstrike victims. One of the villagers says, I lost 34 family members to that bombing. Meanwhile, the governor of Enugu State, Mba, presents a 521.6 billion naira 2024 budget to the State Assembly. About the nameplate of the Daily Independent this morning, there's mass resignations hitting public universities as ASU cries out. That's the Daily Independent.
A variety of stories make it to the front page of the international papers this morning. If we can pull up the Metro. Yes, it's a done deal. Headlines the Metro as Home Secretary James Cleverly is shaking hands with the Rwandan Foreign Secretary. Now, the pair signed a new asylum treaty with Rwanda, who will take illegal immigrants on behalf of the UK. The paper carries quotes from Mr. Cleverly, who said that he felt very strongly the treaty addresses issues raised by the Supreme Court when they ruled the previous deal unlawful last month.
The Guardian UK. Apocalyptic conditions in Gaza blocking aid. That's coming from a UN official. Sellafield nuclear leak could pose a safety risk. And also, Tory right in threat to Sunak on Rwanda. They've been at loggerheads because of this Rwanda asylum legislation. Also, the leading photo from The Guardian UK this morning with the caption, Exit stage left, is that of the English National Opera, which is set to move to Manchester.
Well, let's bring in Emmanuel Bello for analysis of the big stories on the front pages today. Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for joining us this morning. A couple of the national papers do carry, as expected, the Kaduna bombing. We cannot sweep that under the carpet. On Arise News, primetime news for the day, Newsnight, we had the Chief of Defense Staff speaking, and he made a couple of statements. This day is carrying that story as its lead story. He says we acted on intelligence, however, we missed. Emmanuel?
Well, yeah, that's a very swift response from the CDS, and we were discussing that this way earlier, that, look, it's the first time we're seeing this owning up, this taking responsibility, this, level of leadership where you're saying, look, we were wrong. And it's not just the first time they've said that before, they're repeating it again, and the CDS is doubling down on that, saying, look, it was in error. But of course, the victims, I wonder if this way, as such, the pains out there. And so various bodies are still calling for all sort of probes, deeper look into what must have gone wrong. And those investigations are going to throw up a lot. And then, of course, the level of these errors and the levels of the mistake, it gives you insight on how the war on terror is being fought, and that's the big picture here. We're beginning to see, the CDS, for instance, was explained to us that there's the Air Force component of the military. I don't think many of us, the rest of us, the civilians, understood that, especially when the Air Force quickly denied that it was not involved in it. I was almost confused until the CDS explained that, look, it's got the other components of the security formation in the army, for instance. So, and that this is what they did, and that it was just a case of, it was an error. But that is, imagine to die because of someone's error. I mean, how much of closure will the victims get? But he said it happened, and that it's war, and that we're at war, and during war you have collateral damages. So, sadly, it's also a referendum or a kind of a look into his own personal records as a person. So he's defending himself in these interviews. That is why he's talking about his record. He's talking about the fact that he's just doing his job as a professional. He's dispassionate. He takes the war on terror very seriously, and that this is in error. How much will the country believe him? It's probably another thing. But you can see the passion, the sincerity with which Christopher Musa was saying those things, saying that, look, it's something that it's a war that he wants to fight. It doesn't matter. He's not looking at this from any other lens other than the professional lens of a fighter who, within the formation. So these are the sort of things. He's defending his records too. He's been forced to do that practically because, of course, some people have alleged that maybe there were other motives. And they say, no, it's just the war on terror. It's, it's nothing to do with any group of persons, and that this is nothing but collateral damage. But for while those explanations are on, of course, the rest of the country will be wondering how the military, it brings to mind all the questions we've been asking since yesterday. What is the intelligence gathering all about? How did they go about it? And you say, well, it's not a failure of intelligence. It's just the failure of operation and precision on targets and all of that. So I'm sure the investigation, everybody is calling for a probe now. The investigation, this one might throw up more things. And there's just a bit of national tragedy, with the president also saying he's condoling with victims. And I think another paper carried the horror story of individuals, bringing it down to people, because we have all these figures, but the newspapers need to actually, we need to focus on individual experiences, and many of them are beginning to talk to us about the experience itself.
Yes, I think one of the papers is carrying that as its lead story. The survivors talking about how they went about, what they have been experiencing since that bomb strike, and President Tinubu has now ordered an investigation, because as much as it's important for the army to step up and take responsibility, there also has to be a probe, and that probe cannot just be a probe that we don't end up hearing about. We need to understand what happened and details of how to prevent or mitigate this type of situations. The Daily Independent has two interesting stories this morning. Its leading headline says Nigerian airlines are lamenting $60 million loss to bird strikes annually. They said they suffered 60 bird strikes in the last 10 months this year. They're also asking the federal government to reduce cost of bird damages with modern techs. This is also coupled with the issue of delayed flights and cancellations, Emmanuel. Also at the top there, you have mass resignations hitting public universities in the country. ASU is crying out that, look, most of their staff, most of their lecturers, professors are leaving rapidly, Emmanuel. So these two stories.
Yeah, I think that's the bit that will concern a lot of people about, this mass leaving and all that, especially in the education sector. Any story that has to do with the education sector is a very interesting one. It should be leading the paper, actually, but of course, the paper chose to lead with the bird strikes. It's something that I don't think many of us are very much aware. It's new too, and that they are talking about the figures and the loss. But the story on this brain drain, the loss, also complaining that lecturers are leaving, it's sad, because we're already talking about a deplorable state of our education, and then because of the crisis of not meeting agreements in the past, it's beginning to affect the universities in a very bad way. I think that's a terrible revelation, and one that both parents and teachers, and of course parents and the students alike will be worried about, the shortages in manpower. And the education sector can be bigger than the lecturers and the kind of people that we have there to do the job. And when they are going away because of, because the demands are not made, agreements are not kept, and of course this back and forth between FG and ASU, it's really taking its toll on learning.
Indeed. We're talking about Japa syndrome, the mass exodus. It's not happening only in the medical sector, but also in the education sector, where there are not enough teachers anymore. Emmanuel, let's return to the front page of this day. There's a story that caught your attention there. Finance Minister has been speaking about how to finance the 2024 budget. In fact, there are talks about privatizing ministries, departments, and agencies, real estate, property. We have ministries, that have buildings. Some of them still have to rent and all of that. But we are looking at how to streamline all of that to get more money. There's another story there on the chairman and editor-in-chief of This Day Arise Media Group, Nduka Obaigbena, who is to receive the Lifetime Achievement Honor at Dame Awards.
Well, yeah, congratulations to our chairman. I mean, when I say this, I think I speak for almost everyone that's had some kind of experience with chairman Nduka, the owner of this, network. You agree with me that it's a very deserving award. All of us have, experienced him, not just now, but of course, over the years, his dedication to work and this ability to change, the narratives, to be able to take something from almost from nowhere to where it is. And but we don't talk a lot about ourselves. This why we that practice this thing. We talk about others. We don't make the news all the time, but from time to time, it's heartwarming to know that there are people out there who are willing to recognize the kind of work that people do around the media. So, and Nduka Obaigbena can be compared, arguably with Rupert Murdoch, with anyone that has done much for this industry, especially with newspaper work, where, the brand this day that has become, almost internationally accepted. And of course, this medium itself that, continue to garner praise all over. If you look at the time RS came on board, compared with other networks, you agree with me that we have become almost the #1, network to watch across the country, and it does all of that without showing himself much. Stays in the background most of the time, but he has become something of an enigma in the industry. But that's even at a larger scale. If you look at it from relationships, the relationship is built with many of us. Our career, he's been the dominant force in our career for a very long time. Sometimes we go away, we return, and he's still there for us. And I think that's something, I think it deserves more of this kind of, awards. What do you think? You
couldn't have said it better. And of course, sometimes you're allowed to pat yourself on the back. Emmanuel, well said this morning. Thank you very much. And I think that's all we have for the press review today, Emmanuel. Hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow. But let's hear your own views on all the burning issues. You can follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, @AriseTV.